I want to reach out more to the vlogger themselves. And if I'm attacking them personally, they're not going to really listen because they're going to be automatically defensive. A lot of the commentary, I've watched quite a bit about the anti-MLMs and child exploitation and that type of thing. And like what they're doing, I like the message they're giving, and I agree with it a lot of times. But for me personally, I don't want to attack a person. It's just not my style. So I thought, hey, I'm just going to write stories that kind of get that message across, because honestly, I think you kind of lose the message on the person. To me, I want to get the message to the person that's doing it. It's fine to get the message to people that already agree with it. For example, if you don't like family vloggers, you can go on there and you can get a group of people on your team that do not like family vlogging, and you guys can rant and rave all day long in the comments. And I do think there is a place for that, but that's just not my style. To me, I want to reach out more to the vlogger themselves. And if I'm attacking them personally, they're not going to really listen because they're going to be automatically defensive, in my opinion. So I think I just thought I'd start writing these little silly stories that kind of talk about these issues without directly pointing fingers, just trying to get my point across in a different style, if that even makes sense. So that's why I've done what I'm doing. I bought the Grimm's Fairytales. I find those very interesting. They're dark humor. I'm all about some dark humor. And for example, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, it's called something different in Grimm's Fairytales. It's a little dark. I will probably get on here and read that, but I also wrote a story representing that, and I kind of throw in some of these topics, and I think you'll see what I mean. I think there's humor in the stories. I'm brand new at this. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to put it out there and just see if it's interesting to anyone. I do have a passion, and I have a topic that I want to eventually delve into, but I'm not ready to go to that place yet. And I just sort of wanted to dip my toe in the water, so to speak, and I thought this might be a good way to do it. So I'll see what you guys think. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know if you do. Let me know if you'd like to see more. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll be back with more videos. Okay, so I decided I wanted to read this story of Snow White that comes from the Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. Very cool book. It's actually called Little Snow White, but I wrote a story based on this, and I put my own spin on it. It's loosely based on this, but I wanted to read this first before you kind of watch the other video, so you kind of see where I'm coming at, because it's more based on this, not based on like the Disney Snow White. It's called Little Snow White. Once upon a time, in the middle of winter, when the flakes of snow were falling like feathers from the sky, a queen sat at a window sewing, and the frame of the window was made of black ebony. And while she was sewing and looking out the window at the snow, she pricked her finger with a needle, and 3 drops of blood fell upon the snow. And the red looked pretty upon the white snow, and she thought to herself, if only I had a child as white as the snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood of the window frame. Soon after that, she had a little daughter who was as white as snow and as red as blood, and her hair, okay, it says and as red as blood. I was assuming maybe the lips were red as blood, but it says and as red as blood, and her hair was black as ebony, and she was therefore called Little Snow White. And when the child was born, the queen died. After a year passed, the king took another wife. She was a beautiful woman, but proud and haughty, and she could not bear that anyone else should surpass in her beauty. She had a wonderful looking glass, and when she stood in front of it and looked at herself, she said, looking glass on the wall, who in this land is fairest of them all?" The looking glass answered, "You, O queen, are the fairest of all." Then she was satisfied, for she knew that the looking glass spoke the truth. But Snow White was growing up and grew more and more beautiful. And when she was 7 years old, she was as beautiful as the day, and more beautiful than the queen herself, which is a little odd at 7 years old, quite honestly, but okay. And once, when the queen asked the looking glass on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" it answered, "You are fairer than all who are here, Lady Queen, but more beautiful still is Snow White, as I ween." Then the queen was shocked and turned yellow and green with envy. From that time, whenever she looked at Snow White, her heart heaved in her breast, and she hated the girl so much. The envy and pride grew higher and higher in her heart like a weed, so that she had no peace day or night. She called a hunter and said, "Take her and bring me back her heart as the token." The hunter obeyed and took her away, but when he had drawn his knife and was about to pierce Snow White's innocent heart, she began to weep and said, "Oh, dear hunter, spare me my life. I will run away into the wild forest and never come home again." And as she was so beautiful, the hunter had pity on her and said, "Run away then, you poor child. The wild beasts will soon devour you," thought he, and yet it seemed as if a stone had been rolled from his heart, since he no longer needed to kill her. And as a young boar just then came running by, he stabbed it and cut out its heart and took it to the queen as proof the child was dead. The cook had to salt this, and the wicked queen ate it and thought she had eaten the heart of Snow White. Cannibalism much? That's kind of gross, okay. But now the poor child was all alone in the great forest, and so terrified that she looked at every leaf on every tree. She did not know what to do, and she began to run, and ran over sharp stones and through thorns, and the wild beasts ran past her, but did her no harm. She ran as far as her feet would go until it was almost evening. Then she saw a little cottage and went into it to rest. Everything in the cottage was small, but neater and cleaner than you can imagine. There was a table on which was a white cover, and 7 little plates, on each plate a little spoon. Moreover, there were 7 knives, forks, 7 little mugs. Against the wall stood 7 little beds side by side and covered with snow white bedspreads. Little Snow White was so hungry and thirsty that she ate some vegetables and bread from each plate and drank a drop of wine out of each mug, for she did not wish to take all from only one. Then, as she was so tired, she laid herself down on each of the little beds, but none of them suited her. One was too long, another too short, but alas, she found the 7th one was right, and so she remained in it, said a prayer, and went to sleep, which reminds me a lot of Goldilocks, where she had to go in all the beds until one was right. I don't remember this with Snow White, so this is new to me too. When it was quite dark, the owners of the cottage came back. They were 7 dwarfs who dug and delved in the mountains for ore. They lit their 7 little candles, and now the cottage was lit as they saw someone had been there, for everything was not in the same order in which they had left it. The first one said, "Who has been sitting in my chair?" The second, "Who has been eating off my plate?" The third, "Who has been taking some of my bread?" The fourth, who has been eating my vegetables? The fifth, who has been using my fork? The sixth, who has been cutting with my knife? The seventh, who has been drinking out of my mug? If it were me, I'd be like, who has been drinking my wine? Anyway, the first looked around and saw that there was a little hole in his bed. And he said, who has been getting into my bed? The others came up and each called out, somebody has been laying in my bed too. But the seventh, when he looked at his bed, saw little Snow White, who was lying asleep in it. And he called the others, who came running up and cried out with astonishment, and brought their 7 little candles and let the light fall on little Snow White. Oh heavens, cried they, what a lovely child. And they were so glad they did not wake her up, but let her sleep in bed. And the 7th dwarf slept with his companions, 1 hour with each, and so got through the night. When it was morning, little Snow White awoke and was frightened when she saw the 7 dwarfs, but they were friendly and asked her what her name was. My name is Snow White, she answered. How have you come to our house? Said the dwarfs. Then she told them that her stepmother had wished to have her killed, and the hunter had spared her life, and that she had run the whole day until at last she had found their dwelling. The dwarfs said, if you'll take care of our house, cook, make the beds, wash, sew, and knit, and if you'll keep everything neat and clean, you can stay with us, and you shall want for nothing. Yes, said Snow White, with all my heart. And she stayed with them. She kept the house in order for them. In the mornings, they went to the mountains and looked for copper and gold. In the evenings, they came back, and then their supper had to be ready. The girl was alone the whole day, so the good dwarfs warned her and said, beware of your stepmother. She will soon know that you are here. Be sure to let no one come in. But the queen, believing she had eaten Snow White's heart, was certain that she was again the first and most beautiful of all. And she went to her looking-glass and said, looking glass on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all? And the glass answered, O queen, you are the fairest of all I see, but over the hills where the 7 dwarfs dwell, Snow White is still alive and well, and none is so fair as she. Okay, I have to take a break because I actually have a meeting in 15 minutes, and so I will continue a little later, but I hope you can all see what I'm talking about. It is quite interesting, a little bit different than the Disney version, so I'll see you guys in a bit. Hello, this is part 2 of a story that I'm reading called Little Snow White. Just really quick side note, I'm reading this story from Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. They are a little bit darker of fairy tales, and I have then written my own fairy tales in a modern day version to focus on some topics that I think are kind of hot topics right now, and so far some child exploitation, some beauty stuff, some MLM, cults, and social media. And so I've written a few. I don't have them all posted yet, but I have written some. I don't know if anybody will ever watch them, but I'm gonna throw them out there just in case anybody's interested. And now let me continue this story so this is not a totally long video. The queen, believing she had eaten Snow White's heart, was certain that she was again the first and most beautiful of all, and she went to her looking-glass and said,
looking glass on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?
And the glass answered,
O queen, you are the fairest of all I see, but over the hills where the 7 dwarfs dwell, Snow White is still alive and well, and none is so fair as she.
Then she was astounded, for she knew the looking-glass never spoke falsely, and she knew the hunter had betrayed her, and that little Snow White was still alive. And so she thought and thought again how she might kill her, for so long as she was not the fairest in the whole land, envy let her have no rest. And when she had at last thought of something to do, she painted her face and dressed herself like an old peddler, and no one could have known her. In this disguise, she went over the 7 mountains to the 7 dwarfs and knocked at the door and cried,
Pretty things to sell, very cheap, very cheap.
Little Snow White looked out the window and called out, Good day, my good woman. What have you to sell?
Good things, pretty things,
She answered,
laces of all colors,
and she pulled out one in which was woven in bright-colored silk. I may let the worthy old woman in, thought Snow White, and she unbolted the door and bought the pretty laces.
Child,
Said the old woman,
what a fright you look. Come, I will lace you properly for once.
Snow White had no suspicion, but stood before her and let herself be laced with the new laces. But the old woman laced so quickly and so tightly that Snow White lost her breath and fell down as if dead.
Now I am the most beautiful,
Said the queen to herself, and ran away. Not long afterwards, in the evening, the 7 dwarfs came home, but were shocked that they saw their dear little Snow White laying on the ground, and that she neither stirred nor moved, and seemed to be dead. They lifted her up, and as they saw that she was laced too tightly, they cut the laces, and then she began to breathe a little, and after a while came to life again. When the dwarfs heard what had happened, they said,
The old peddler was none other than the wicked queen. Take care and let no one come in when we are not with you.
But the wicked woman, when she had reached home, went in front of the glass and said,
Looking glass, on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?
and it answered as before.
O queen, you are the fairest of all I see, but over the hills where the 7 dwarfs dwell, Snow White is still alive and well, and none is so fair as she.
When she heard that, all of her blood rushed to her heart with fear, for she saw plainly that little Snow White was again alive. But now, she said,
I will think of something that shall put an end to you.
and by the help of witchcraft, which she understood, she made a poisonous comb. She then disguised herself and took the shape of another old woman. So she went over the 7 mountains to the 7 dwarfs, knocked at the door, and cried,
Good things to sell, cheap, cheap.
Little Snow White looked out and said,
Go away, I cannot let anyone in.
I suppose you can look, said
the old woman, and pulled the poisonous comb out and held it up. It pleased the girl so well that she let herself be fooled and opened the door. When they had struck a bargain, the old woman said,
Now I will comb you properly for once.
Poor little Snow White had no suspicion, and let the old woman do as she pleased. But hardly had she put the comb in her hair, and the poison took effect, and the girl fell down senseless.
You paragon of beauty,
Said the wicked woman,
you are done for good.
and she went away. But fortunate it was almost evening when the 7 dwarfs came home, and they saw Snow White lying as if dead upon the ground. They at once suspected the stepmother, and they looked and found the poisoned comb. Scarcely had they taken it out when Snow White came to and told them what had happened. Then they warned her once more to be upon her guard, and to open the door to no one. The queen at home went in front of the glass and said,
Looking glass on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?
Then it answered as before.
O queen, you are the fairest of all I see, but over the hills where the 7 dwarfs dwell, Snow White is still alive and well, and none is so fair as she.
When she heard the glass speak, she trembled and shook with rage.
Snow White shall die, she cried, even if it costs me my life.
With that, she went into a quiet, secret, lonely room where no one ever came, and there she made a very poisonous apple. Outside, it looked pretty, white with a red cheek, so that everyone who saw it longed for it, but whoever ate a piece surely must die. When the apple was ready, she painted her face and dressed herself up as a countrywoman, and so she went over the 7 mountains to the 7 dwarfs. She knocked on the door. Snow White pulled her head out of the window and said,
I cannot let anyone in. The 7 dwarfs have forbidden me.
It's all the same to me,
answered the woman.
I shall soon get rid of my apples. Here, I will give you one.
No,
Said Snow White.
I dare not take anything.
Are you afraid of poison?
Said the old woman.
Look, I will cut the apple in 2 pieces. You eat the red cheek, and I will eat the white.
The apple was so cunningly made that only the red cheek was poisoned. Snow White longed for the fine apple, and when she saw that the woman ate part of it, she could resist no longer, and stretched out her hand and took the poisonous half. But hardly had she taken a bite, and she fell down, dead. That's what we get when we don't listen to the dwarfs. Then the queen looked at her with a dreadful look, and laughed aloud, and said,
White as snow, red as blood, black as ebony wood. This time the dwarfs cannot wake you up again.
And when she asked the looking-glass at home,
looking glass on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?
It answered at last,
O Queen, in this land, you are fairest of
all. Then her envious heart had rest, far as an envious heart can have rest. The dwarfs, when they came home in the evening, found Snow White lying upon the ground. She breathed no longer and was dead. They lifted her up to see whether they could find anything poisonous, unlaced her, combed her hair, washed her with water and wine. But it was all of no use. The poor child was dead and remained dead. They laid her upon a bier, which I have no idea what that is. And all 7 of them sat around it and wept for her, and wept 3 days long. Then they were going to bury her, but she still looked as if she were alive, and still her pretty red cheeks. They said we could not bury her in the dark ground, and they had a transparent coffin of glass made so that she could be seen from all sides, and they laid her in it, and in golden letters wrote upon it her name, and that was the king's daughter. Then they put the coffin upon the mountain, and one of them always stayed by it and watched it. The birds came too and wept for Snow White, first an owl, then a raven, and at last a dove. And now Snow White lay a long, long time in the coffin, and she did not change, but looked as if she were asleep, for she was as white as snow, as red as blood, and her hair as black as ebony. It happened, however, that the king's son came into the forest and went to the dwarf's house to spend the night. He saw the coffin on the mountain and beautiful Snow White inside, and read what was written upon it in golden letters. He said to the dwarfs,
Let me have the coffin. I will give you whatever you want for it.
But the dwarfs answered,
We will not part with it for all the gold in the world.
Then he said,
Let me have it as a gift, for I cannot live without seeing Snow White. I will honor and prize her as my dearest possession.
As he spoke this in a way, the good dwarfs took pity on him and gave him the coffin. And now the king's son had carried it away by his servants on their shoulders. And it happened that they stumbled upon a tree stump, and with the shock, the poisonous piece of apple, which Snow White had bitten off, came out of her throat. And before long she opened her eyes, lifted up the lid of the coffin, sat up, and was once more alive.
Oh, heavens, where am I?
She cried. The king's son, full of joy, said,
You are with me.
And told her what had happened, and said,
I love you more than everything in the world. Come with me to my father's place. You shall be my wife.
Hopefully this is a different king than Snow White's dad. So Snow White was willing, and she went with him, and their wedding was held with a great show of splendor. But Snow White's wicked stepmother was also invited to the feast. When she had dressed herself in beautiful clothes and went before the looking-glass and said,
looking glass on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?
The glass answered,
O Queen, of all here the fairest is you, but the young queen fairer by far, it is true.
Then the wicked woman uttered a curse, and was so miserable so utterly miserable that she knew not what to do. At first, she would not go to the wedding at all, but she had no peace and must go see the young queen. And when she went, she knew Snow White, and she stood there with rage and fear, but could not stir. But iron slippers had already been put upon the fire, and they were brought in with tongs and set before her. Then she was forced to put on the red-hot shoes and dance until she dropped down dead. Yes, that's how it ends. So when you see my version of Snow White, which is called Sky Blue and the Six Gnomes, you'll see that I've changed it a little bit, and I've added a modern spin, and I've added some of the topics that I talked about earlier. So I'll let you go watch it yourself. I will try to link it. I've never done that before, but I'm going to give it a try, and you guys can go watch that and see what you think. I would love to hear what you think about it, and thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will continue to create if this is something anyone's interested in. Thanks, guys.